Hi, everyone. This is Jan and Joel from Cancer ABCs. I'm Jan Manarite. I'm the Executive Vice President. Happy to be working with Joel, who is the president and co-founder with his wife, Wendy. Joel and I bring something really unique to our advocacy for prostate cancer, and that's that we actually lived the journey for a long time. I lived it with my husband for 13 years. Joel has lived it with multiple cancers for more than 13 years. One of the critical things in your journey as a prostate cancer patient is just working the doctor's appointment. Everything that I would research and study would come together and culminate in the conversation and the appointment that was going to then change or alter my husband's care or not. So we want to focus on how we learned through probably pain and struggle to work those doctor's appointments, how to make them work for the cancer patient. And we're going to do that today. I'm going to interview, and Joel's going to be my interviewee. And we're going to let Joel tell you some interesting stories about how he worked his doctor appointments, what he learned, and what we'd like to share with you and actually teach you, take-home lessons from us. So Joel, you want to start with your introduction and then maybe go into your first story? And
yeah, sure. Absolutely. And I think that the ideal, Jan, is that we learn to work our doctor's appointments, but as you learn, sometimes the doctor's appointments will work you, and you've got to find a way to actually work it yourself. And I think as I go through a couple of the stories I'm going to share, I think that I show that I've got a little better, a little more control, and became a little more sensitive to the needs that I had to have in order to have a better doctor's appointment. And actually, I'm almost 70 years old, and my first cancer was at somewhere in the younger 30s. So I've got 30 plus years of experience being told that I have cancer and dealing with doctors. But despite that, the first story I'm going to share is going to be as if I had never had an experience having a doctor's appointment before. I learned a very important lesson. When I knew that I had had a prostate cancer reoccurrence, I had been treated with surgery 4.5, 5 years prior to the reoccurrence. I needed to start a search because I still was being treated and seeing urologists, and it was time for me to step up and find a medical oncologist. And I interviewed a number of different medical oncologists, and fortunately for me, my wife, Wendy, who is our co-founder of Cancer ABCs, always came with me to the appointment. And I think this is important. And she taught me a very important lesson. And again, this is very specific to this first interview. So we met with the doctor. And by the way, this is a doctor that I still see. And
how many years later? How many years have you been with this doctor now?
Oh, it's going to be
5, 6, 7.
No. We're
10.
More than that. I think it's about 14 years.
Got it. Thank you.
But that doesn't mean that one should stay with the same doctor if that doesn't make sense. In my case, my doctor made sense, and I do occasionally see another doctor just to kind of run things by, get a second opinion. And I think
but what it does mean is you establish a good relationship, and so you were able to stay with it.
Right. And if I hadn't established that relationship, I wouldn't be with this doctor at this point. Yes. So I remember going into first interview to meet this doctor, and I think I had probably already seen 4 or 5 other oncologists. And fortunate for me, I live in metropolitan New York City, where there are a number of really good oncologists. So if you do have that possibility, or that, you are living in an area that allows that, you should definitely consider seeing more than one doctor, especially when you're making your initial decision. So I went to see this doctor. Wendy came with me, and I really, was just kind of was exploratory. I was overwhelmed by being told that I had a reoccurrence. I was totally convinced that I wouldn't live for 5 years. That was, I said, almost 19 years now. I'm still here. And I had this interview, and I think the interview went well as far as the medical side and we went we left the doctor's office, and Wendy said, "So, what do you think?" And I said to her, "The guy is really smart, but you know what? I can't see him being my doctor." I said, "Well, why not?" She said, "Well," I said, "I can't see this particular person giving a hoot if I'm lying in a hospital bed and I'm dying." And again, I really did think I didn't have 5 years left, which is clearly not the case, or wasn't the case. And I said, "This doctor is just not going to care." And she looked at me and she said, "You know what? You're probably right. But why are you hiring a doctor?" She said, "If you're looking to hire someone who's going to hold your hand," she said, "he's not the right doctor. But I hope you're not going to hire a doctor for that, because you know something? That's my job." That was, Wendy said that to me.
Yeah, I'm going to interject, and what I'm doing is holding up what I think are bullet points in the lessons that we've learned. And that was the value of having another viewpoint, another set of ears and eyes, and another set of understanding with him, with Joel in the appointment. Your advocate can be anyone. I've seen daughters, sons, husbands, wives, partners, but an advocate, watch for your advocate and listen for them.
Right, right. And it could be a friend. It doesn't have to be family. I think it's an excellent point.
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I said, "You're probably right. What is it that I expect from this doctor?" She said, "He is cutting edge. He knows research. He does research along with provide clinical care, and he's smart. Isn't that what you want in a doctor?" And I said, "I guess so." So with hesitation, I decided to start out with him as a doctor. And clearly Wendy's wise, because I'm still with him 19, or I rather, if 14 or 15 years, whatever that number is later.
Yeah.
And I will have to share that as we've developed a relationship, our relationship has changed. And do I still think he's going to hold my hands? Probably not, but I do think he'll care.
But what you decided was that's not what you needed. And Wendy helped you to understand that because she knew you.
Exactly. And also she knew what she wanted to do. I mean, so it's important to have somebody involved, and it's important to be open to what your advocate says. It's important to bring an advocate if you can, and to solicit their feedback and listen to what they have to say. And I think that's what I learned. And that was probably my very first lesson.
That's a great example.
When I became metastatic. Yeah.
So what was your second appointment or second lesson? What other story do you want to share?
So as we progressed and we developed a relationship, and I progressed along, whatever treatment decisions I ended up making, I found usually I was able to have all the questions that I had answered, but there were times that that just didn't happen. And the doctor would come into the examining room, and clearly he was looking at his watch as he walked in. I think it's something we've all experienced. And I had a number of questions that I had written down. Write your questions down. Thank you, Jan. And other questions, of course, as you have a conversation with your doctor, this will bring other questions or follow-up or clarifications. And clearly he was in a rush, whether he had 4 patients backed up or whether he needed to go off and do whatever he was going to do. He really didn't want to be in the room with me other than a few minutes. And I was sitting on the examining table and we were talking, and he clearly was getting ready to leave. He had sat down at the computer, started putting in some notes, medical records got issues. And I got off the table and kind of put myself between him and the door. And he turned, he said, "Well, it was good to see you again, Joel." And he said, "Yeah, but doctor, I have a couple of more questions." And he said, "Well," and he looked at his watch, and he moved to the right to walk around me to get to the door. And so I moved to my left. Obviously, we're opposite each other. So I moved and I blocked him. Not physically, yes, physically, but I did not touch him. And that's the important thing. When you do the Nowak Shuffle, and this is what we refer to it here, you never touch anyone, hands off. But he had to then listen to my next question, and I was able to ask a question. And it was a really important question. And he answered it. And then, of course, stepped to one of the sides. And so I stepped to the side too, because I had another question. And he was clearly frustrated, but he wasn't going to touch me, just as I wasn't going to touch him.
Let
And I
me
got
interject if I could. Just a little clarity, adding my own lessons, I guess. In the 15, 16, 17 years you've been doing this, you've only done that once.
That's correct.
You've only done that once. And for some reason, that one time you knew was most important to you.
Right.
Because sometimes when you're overwhelmed, like I often was, and you were in the beginning, you find yourself trying to battle everything. And some of these points we're giving you will hopefully help you to pick your battles better, just writing things down, bringing an advocate. And you chose that one time because it was important to do that.
Exactly. And I would say
Nowak Shuffle.
when you come in with your questions, don't be realistic also, because there are other patients who need to see the doctor. He has other commitments and there's limited time. And so I think what's important is to prioritize your questions, Jan,
Yes.
And know what are the ones you have to have an answer for now. And if you can get the answer for the others, that's great. But if you can't, there'll be another meeting. But
Exactly. I was just going to say that. Once I learned that I'm going to see him again next month,
Right.
or, in a month and a half, those questions can wait. Let me ask these for this week, this month, that help me pick my battles.
Right. And I also found that, that I'm able to, if I had a question that I still really wanted answered, but it wasn't on that priority, that number, one list, I would send an email to him.
Not everyone can email their doctors, but this is December 2020, I should have added, and we're hopefully coming near the end of pandemic, we're hoping, but telehealth is a new thing. So
Right.
There are opportunities for telehealth now that you and I didn't have years ago. So
Right. And you're right, not every doctor will email respond, but
yeah.
I mean, to go back, so part of the process when I had that first meeting with this doctor, I asked him about how we would communicate, because that was an important thing for me.
Ask them how you're going to communicate. That's a great question.
Right. And so he said that he would, I could send an email, and when he had an opportunity, he would reply. And sometimes I don't get an answer the same day. Sometimes it may take a day or two. But again, this is priority B and C questions. And I often, there were exceptions. I'm not going to say I always got an answer, but for the most part, I got answers. So I always ask, what's the best way to communicate? It may be through the nurse practitioner. It may be by email. And I think that's an important thing, to establish a way that you're going to communicate with your doctor. I think that's something that you should.
Outside of the appointment.
Right.
Outside of that one appointment.
Right. Coming right out of the starting gate. To me, that was something that was important to me.
That's great.
So I urge people to ask their doctor if they haven't, how are we going to communicate when we're not sitting face to face?
Yeah.
And the goal is to get your questions answered in a reasonable fashion, so you don't have to do the Nowak Shuffle.
Right. That's the goal, to avoid the Nowak Shuffle.
Yeah, exactly. It's not something I recommend a lot, and
prevention is everything. Prevent the Nowak Shuffle.
Exactly.
But don't be afraid to pick your battle if you have to at the right time. It's something that happens from time to time. And, learning that balance and learning to trust your instincts, if you haven't, is something you'll develop.
So that actually leads me to the next and the last story I want to share.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, I do have a number of different cancers, and one of them is melanoma. Now, I do have a family history of melanoma. My grandmother passed away from melanoma, so I've always been pretty careful about making sure that I have a skin check at best, at least annually, and if there's anything of question or suspicious, more often. It's really important to take control of your health and be responsible to make sure you do what you're supposed to do. And I had made an appointment with a new dermatologist. I don't recall why I was changing dermatologists. And I had a spot on my knee. And it really didn't look suspicious. It looked like honestly, it looked like a little pimple, not a typical melanoma thing.
Did it pass the typical A, B, C, D that they do? Like, A country,
right.
B is for borders, C is for color, D is for
right.
diameter.
But this just looked like a pimple, but it just was.
So not really. It didn't typically fit the typical
It didn't
ABCD.
exactly, but it was
But
talking
it's
to me.
still something, right?
Yeah, it was talking to me, and when I say talking to me, I had conversations with it. Now, I don't want to say that I was delusional because I didn't really think this was talking to me, but I actually did have conversations. I know it's a little weird and strange, and I went to this dermatologist, and what usually happens if those people who have never had skin checks, what's the standard thing is you walk in, you're in your paper gown, and the doctor will say, is there, anything that of particular concern? And so I went and I pointed to this little pimple on my knee, and I said, yeah, I'm a little concerned about this. And he looked at it very cursory manner and said, oh, it's nothing, don't worry about
What
it.
does cursory mean? What do you mean by cursory?
I mean, he just really quickly looked at it, kind of took a glance. It's like,
Matter of
nothing.
fact, yeah.
Yeah, it's nothing, no big deal. Don't worry about it. You're being paranoid. And I said, but it's actually bothering me. I said, I know it's weird, but it's talking to me. It's telling me that it's going to kill me. And I really do. It had said to me it was going to kill me. And he looked at it,
You
then
didn't
did
tell
a
me that
skin
part.
check. I'm sorry?
You didn't tell me that part.
Oh, it's absolutely true. And he said, there's nothing wrong. You're fine. Come back and see me in a year. I got dressed. I went to my car. I was driving out to work. And all of a sudden, this pimple is talking to me again. It's actually having a party. And this is what I
I
visualize.
want to break this down to the right take-home lesson, so let's be careful about that.
Well, I visualized that it was waving flags and saying, aha, we got you. We're
Well,
gonna
this is both listen to your body and trust your instincts, and that's what you're describing. It's just that was your way. You're going to
right.
describe it as
So I decided to get a second opinion. And because I was not happy with the answer I got, because this thing was having a party, and I know it sounds weird, and I apologize, but it's how I viewed it.
okay.
And I went to a different
The result was
dermatologist.
good. The
Yeah.
result,
Well, the result is good. Hey, I'm still here.
that's right.
And I went to a different dermatologist, and again sat on the examining room, in my paper gown, a different paper gown this time, and the doctor walked in again. It's the first time I had ever met the doctor, and in this case, she said to me, "Well, is there anything of concern?" And I pointed to my little pimple. And I explained that this thing was having a party, and she looked at me very strangely, kind of took a step back. It's like, okay, maybe I need to call a psych consult here. And I would have understood.
You're like, look, my wife's a psychologist, so, Yeah.
Yeah, my wife is.
Right, your wife.
And she looked at it again, kind of, quickly, and said, oh, don't worry about it. It's nothing. Did the rest of the skin check, because I didn't tell her that I had already seen another dermatologist and that
Sure.
he had checked it out, because I didn't want to influence anything. And
Of course.
and she said, oh, you're fine. You should come back and see me, give me your history in a year. And I said, I need for you to biopsy this, because this is a concern. This is talking to me.
Let me interject right there. Because you're an advocate, you knew that everything was guessing. The only thing that would actually diagnose you was to remove it. The only thing that would diagnose melanoma was pathology, which is a biopsy or surgical removal. And you knew this, and that's what you were going for.
Correct. And so I said to her, I really need for you to biopsy this. And she said, well, I don't biopsy healthy tissue. And I said, I'm sorry, doctor.
You don't know if it's healthy till you biopsy.
I don't believe it's healthy. And she said, well, I've been doing this for a long time. It looks fine. And I said, okay, so here's what's going to happen, doctor. I said, I noticed there were a number of people in your waiting room and, want to come in and see you. And I truly don't want to hold things up for you, but I assume you need this examining room back. And she said, well, yeah. And I said, well, here's the problem. Okay, we have a couple of choices. We've come to a decision point in our relationship.
And what'd you say?
And I said, either you're going to biopsy this. I said, in the alternative, you can call the New York City Police Department. I live in New York City, and you can have them come and they can arrest me for trespassing or whatever the proper legal procedure is. But I'm going to tell you this, that they're going to have to lead me out in handcuffs with my hands cuffed behind my back. But I'm still going to have my paper gown. And when they lead me out through your waiting room and through into the elevator of the hospital, this was at a hospital, and down the elevator and then into a police car in front of the hospital, what are you going to see? You're going to see this older man in a paper gown with his behind hanging out, and that's the impression you're going to leave with your patients. And she kind of took 3 steps back and said, "You're serious, aren't you?" I said, "I am dead serious." I said, "I need this biopsied, and I am not leaving without either being forced to leave or having a biopsy." And she
The reason was you were listening to your body, you were trusting your instincts, you did pick your battle, you knew your history.
Right.
You also knew that nothing could diagnose you except pathology. And if you had to leave that appointment, you just have to go find another one.
Right. And basically you need to find a way to stand up for yourself. I'm giving a dramatic story, a dramatic example. It's real.
But this wasn't the Nowak Shuffle. So this was the Nowak.
The Nowak, I don't know. Nowak, New York City Police Department arrest venue. I don't know.
But you got your pathology, and what did it say?
It told me that I had melanoma. The melanoma, there's what's referred to as a thin and a thick. It depends how deep it is. And it was right on the border of being thin and thick. So it was clearly spreading. And I ended up having it removed. And fortunately for me, it looked as though and this is probably about 7-8 years ago. And I have not had a reoccurrence. I have no other melanoma now. So I'm hopeful that took care of it. But I think it's important. I mean, this was something that was important to me. And the bottom line, even if that tissue was healthy, it was so bothering me mentally.
Yes.
That I needed to have that biopsy done for my own sanity. And again, I know people were questioning my sanity at the time.
But for good reason. See, what you bring to the appointment as a patient or caregiver is a lot of knowledge that the doctor, who has a lot of knowledge, doesn't know. So you bring valuable information. And if it's a new doctor, you don't have a relationship yet. So you're trying to establish one. It's kind of like a first date. But if you're picking your battles and you're trusting your instincts and listening to your body, you stood up for the right thing at the right time and got the result you needed, which was the diagnosis. You can't do anything until you have a diagnosis. You can't choose treatment. You can't speculate on what to do next. You need a diagnosis.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a result, I'm still here to bother everyone.
And to teach us all to pick our battles and to stand up for ourselves. Bring your advocate. Listen to your advocate, especially if she's your wife and she's a psychologist and she knows you really well, Wendy.
Well, any advocate. But if you want peace at home, that's even more the case.
But Wendy's a special one. So this is what we're hoping to share with people. Because we are seen as the vice president and the founder and the CEO of this organization, but these are the reasons that we do what we do. Right. Because we went through muck, we went through heck, sometimes we went through hell. Right. To learn things and to turn it into something positive, pay it forward, and to share our take-home lessons with you. So. Right.
And I think I want to share with people that if they got anything out of this video, the next video we're gonna do is I'm gonna interview Jan just the way she did. I hope I can do as good a job as she did with me, because we're gonna learn about her extraordinary journey as an amazing caregiver who kept her husband alive for multiple numbers of years because of her role as a caregiver. And going to the doctor's appointments with her husband.
That's right.
So let's look forward to that. And then hopefully we'll also be looking out for other people who may have interesting stories they want to share, because we would love to have you do that.
And you can find us at www.cancerabcs, that's with the S at the end, .org.
Right.
And you can email either of us, Joel, Joel, at cancerabcs.org, or Jan, Jan, at cancerabcs.org. We're here to help you. So thanks for listening.
Terrific. And thank you for letting me tell my stories and for everyone listening.
He's got more, trust me, and they're all good. So
Maybe another video, but not now.
I
Bye.
know. Thanks, everyone. Bye.